Good Old Days by Project Tiger Moth, directed by Jacob Jarrett and narrated by Robert McGee, tells the story of Toby. Toby's feeling glum because he doesn't feel useful anymore and hasn't felt useful since his old branch line. Thomas and Percy give him jobs to make him feel useful. There's an exciting incident which leads to a pleasant surprise for Toby and us Thomas fans. This is going to be a spoiler-heavy review, so if you've not seen it, I advise that you go and watch it. Or if you haven't seen it but just want to hear my views, we'll carry on as of 3, 2, 1. Okay, you've had your warning, now let's dive into this review. Like a lot of Thomas fans, I love fan fiction. I love the fact that the fans try to keep the franchise alive in its true format after we got All Engines Go. Many channels are absolutely amazing at creating Thomas work. I've mentioned a few of them in a previous video and attempted my own fan work. Project Tiger Moth, however, is the pinnacle of Thomas fanfiction. This was so good. Project Tiger Moth wanted to create a true Series 5 style classic era Thomas and Friends episode, and boy oh boy did they pull it off. Everything was down to a T with this. Even the aspect ratios. If we were watching Series 5 in 2022, we wouldn't have widescreen HD definition. We would have it like it was on a VHS format. Basically a small square on your screen. Not only did they pull this off, but when they did the transitions to old Series 1 stock footage, it was seamless. There was not even the slightest hint of a different width compared to what they were filming on. It was exact. From an editing standpoint, that is incredibly hard to do. And I gotta give props to the unlucky Tug who did the editing on this episode. Right from the start, I loved the title sequence. The opening shot is very hit era-esque, but adapted to a classic series style, which was really good. A really low angle shot of Thomas, Annie and Clarabelle coming round the track with the windmill in the background, and transitions into the classic era style that we know and love. Everything down to the font that they used was classic Thomas exact. The story itself, if they could have picked a more meta episode to start with, I would have been extremely surprised, because this was meta at its finest. Using Toby as the one that we would experience this story through hit everybody in the feels, myself included. The Thomas fandom longs for the good old days. We long for classic series style episodes. And when Toby finds out that his line is being restored to what it once was, and the good old days were here again, that's exactly how this episode felt to me. Like the good old days were back. Many reviewers have said this is like a lost episode of classic Thomas, and I thoroughly agree with that. Everything was immaculate in its detail. The set design was absolutely beautiful. A lot of people thought that the engines were the actual Gauge 1 engines from the classic series. That shows you how great they were. Everything right down to the gloss finish that Season 5 had was just amazing. Keeping it to a core set of characters as well, such as Toby, Gordon, Thomas, and Percy, really helped keep the story on a nice, straightforward track. Pardon the pun. They were able to capitalise on the use of nostalgia while still creating a fresh, riveting and engaging story. Let's talk about the narrator for a second. Robert McGee was absolutely fantastic in his narration. This was meant to emulate Series 5 Alec Baldwin narration, and I genuinely thought that they could have got Alec Baldwin for this. It sounded that precise. As someone from the UK, I do wish that it was done in two styles. The one that they've done for the Alec Baldwin style, and one for the Michael Angelis style of Series 5. Especially since Michael Angelis has passed away, that would have hit everybody right in the nostalgia feels even more. But I do get that this production had American roots, it's based over in America, and they wanted to make a true to form version of Thomas and Friends in the American style. It did not put off my enjoyment of this episode, not in the slightest. I know there will be some British dubs out there. I will probably look at them and give them a review as well, if the interest is there. Let's talk about Jacob Jarrett, the director. Oh my goodness. What a visionary. At the end of the episode, there's a dedication to David Mitton, who sadly passed away in 2008 and was the original director of the classic era of Thomas and Friends. Wherever David Mitton is right now, he will be beaming with pride at the way this episode was done. This had the Mitton traits plastered all over it, especially the Series 5 Mitton traits. The face-on close-up tracking shots was one of the traits that David Mitton really perfected in Series 5 and didn't use much after that, so it was a great kick of nostalgia for us all. What I love about this project is that no profit is being made from this. Project Tiger Moth has existed solely to give the fans a little bit of nostalgia. Jarrett wants to help people re-experience the classic era of Thomas and Friends. Mission accomplished, my friend. It took Project Tiger Moth 2.5 years to get this episode up and running. I know how much money they would have sunk into this. I know how expensive it is. That's not an easy feat to do, and it makes me admire them so much more. I know that no one from Mattel will be watching this channel. I know that probably Britt Allcroft will not be watching the channel either. But if anybody can get back to those two, all I will say is give this crew the reins to Thomas. This is what the fandom have longed for so many years. And we finally got it. None of us thought it was going to happen. I mentioned in my Thomas and the Magic Railroad review that Britt Allcroft done something that we could never do, which was make a classic era Thomas movie. I may have to eat my words because these guys have made a classic era Thomas series. Imagine what they could do if they had a movie project on their hands. Give them a budget. Give them money. We want to see more. This was beautiful. Even little cameo shots of Henry pulling a goods train, James pulling a train, coaches. Love the fact that it was the red ones that he was using in Series 5. Again, the consistency. Just beautiful. The resin faces looked like they were plucked straight from the set, especially the troublesome trucks. I loved those faces, even though those close-up shots traumatized me. Toby's wincing face, that would never have been seen in the classic era, but it's exactly how I imagined his face would look like. The musical score, absolutely brilliant. The cues were spot on. Even the wrong whistle sound for Gordon, which was prominent at this point, they used that. No stone was left unturned when they did this episode. The close-up models of Toby's driver, Percy's driver, and Sir Topham Hatt, fantastic. I cannot praise enough the skill of this live-action adaptation. I also love the fact they put in use of railway practice into the classic episode, with the special junction for Toby to turn around. Because they didn't do a lot of railway practice in Series 5. They had David Maidment, the railway consultant, for the stories, but some railway practice was starting to go on the slide at this point. So having that little bit of railway practice of how an engine can use a special junction to turn around and hook up to the trucks, beautiful. A lovely detail. And there was a couple of meta lines that really hit fans right in the feels. When Toby sees his old station and his old shed and says, "I never thought I'd see it again." You and me both, buddy. I never thought I would see a classic era style version of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends again, especially a new episode in my lifetime. And then the last line for Toby, "It seemed the good old days were here to stay." That shot of him and Henrietta, the low angle going round that bend at the windmill. Oh my goodness. Tears, actual tears. I have watched this about 6 times in 24 hours. The very first time, I just sat with my kids, my 2 4-year-olds, and watched it because I wanted them to have this experience with me. They in particular have had to suffer through Blubba and All Engines Go. They don't really know what classic Thomas was like aside from me showing them the DVDs. But this was something new and fresh and nostalgic for me, a special moment. And when you're a dad, you want to share those moments with your kids. So I put the world on pause, got my boys round the TV, onto the couch, put on YouTube, watched Project Tiger Moth, and it's a moment that I'm going to cherish with my sons forever. Normally I would cut this emotional bit out, but I want you to know how much that meant to me, so thank you. You gave me a precious moment with my kids, and I will not forget it. There's only one thing that I want to say about it. It's not even a negative, it's something that actually gives me hope. When a lot of the images leaked on Twitter for this project. A lot of fans noticed that there was a close-up shot of Henry talking to Percy and a close-up of Gordon and Toad, the brake van, that wasn't in the episode. I hope this means that Project Tiger Moth is not over. This can't be a one and done. We need more of this. The fandom are screaming for it. At the time of this recording, 58,000 people had watched this episode in less than 24 hours. This was beautiful. This was amazing. And I would love to see them tackle more stories. I particularly want to see some stories around the Little Western Gang. Yes, Oliver had a couple of spotlight episodes with Toad in Series 5, but Duck was barely used in Series 5. Donald and Douglas had little to no interaction in the classic era of Series 5. Please make stories about them. It's also very selfish because I would just love to voice Donald and Douglas. I'm Scottish. I would love to do it. But at the same time, don't take it away from Robert McGee. He done a fantastic job. I know I might be pushing it, but any chance you guys could try and do an adaptation of the missing coach from Series 2? That's one thing that the Thomas fandom have wanted for years, and you guys seem to be the only people that could pull it off. Again, I'm happy to voice Donald and Douglas if need be. 2022 has been a rough year for everyone, myself included. A lot of the times we were feeling like there was no hope, and we needed something to kind of bring us back from that darkness. For the Thomas fandom, this story was it. So to sum up, the good old days, it was beautiful, it was nostalgic, while also being fresh, innovative, and puts our fandom in a new pinnacle above any other fandom. For me, this is peak Thomas fanfiction, because I feel like calling it fanfiction is actually an insult to how good this was. This could be a lost episode. That's my thoughts on the good old days by Project Tiger Moth. If you're a hardcore fan of Thomas and Friends, you'll have already checked this out. If you're a casual fan, you might have checked this out. If you're a normie, I still recommend that you watch this. Thank you to everyone that was a part of this project. I really hope that there is more footage out there. I really hope you want to make more episodes. If it's down to costing, definitely get Patreon pages, anything that you can do to make some money. Once I'm back in a solvent position, I will gladly help contribute. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep on chugging.